And finally, New World Democrats must recognize that Zohran Mamdani is the future of the party. Unfortunately, it's the Republican Party. Get it? And if you missed his victory speech in last week's mayoral election in New York, don't worry. You'll see it in every attack ad for the next 2 years. Now, Mamdani seems like a nice guy, and I congratulate him on an extraordinary political achievement. But before the whole left side of the country catches socialism fever,
that opening joke lands because Maher is exposing the uncomfortable truth Democrats do not want to confront. Mamdani may have won New York, yet his victory could become political ammunition everywhere else. Republicans will not need to explain complicated policy failures or invent a new campaign strategy. They can simply replay Mamdani proudly embracing democratic socialism and ask swing voters whether this is really the future they want. And that is the danger. A candidate can dominate in one of America's most progressive cities while becoming a liability in competitive districts across the country. Maher is not mocking Mamdani's achievement. He is warning Democrats about the price of turning a local victory into a national identity. Because the moment Mamdani becomes the face of the party, every moderate Democrat will be forced to answer for positions they may not even support. Republicans are already celebrating, and Mamdani has barely finished his victory speech. Maher predicts that Republicans will turn Mamdani into the face of socialism, and that process has already begun. When Mamdani appeared on The View, he was forced to answer the exact accusation Republicans will repeat in campaign ads across the country, that his democratic socialism is simply communism with better branding.
Let's quickly tick through all the things that Trump said about you, and let's get that out of the way, all right? Number one, he's attacking you as a communist. Are you?
No, I'm a democratic socialist. That means I believe in dignity for all people.
It means more than that.
Yeah, I think...
You're not a communist. I agree with that.
No, I'm not a communist. And I think, a lot of New Yorkers have asked me, what does it mean that you're a democratic socialist?
Yeah.
And I tell them to think about the words of Dr. King from decades ago. He said, call it democracy or call it democratic socialism. There has to be a better distribution of wealth for all of God's children in this country. And that's the heart of it.
Okay. So you're like sort of like a Scandinavian type of politician, I would say, right? Okay.
A little more brown, but yes.
Okay. Okay, he's rooting for your opponent, Andrew Cuomo. Why do you think that is?
He is looking to clear the field for Andrew Cuomo because he knows that Andrew Cuomo would clear the field for Trump's agenda.
Mamdani's answer is politically clever because he refuses to let Trump define the terms of the debate. He rejects the word communist, replaces it with democratic socialist, and immediately wraps that label in the language of dignity, fairness, and Martin Luther King Jr. It sounds less like a revolution and more like a campaign brochure designed by someone who knows exactly which words frighten suburban voters. The real problem, however, is that changing the label does not automatically settle the argument. A better distribution of wealth sounds wonderfully compassionate until someone asks who decides what better means, who pays for it, and how much government power is required to make it happen. That is where Mamdani's smooth television answer meets Maher's warning. On The View, democratic socialism sounds warm, moral, and almost Scandinavian. In a Republican attack ad, the same clip will be shortened to 5 seconds, covered in red graphics, and narrated by a man who sounds like the Constitution is being held hostage. Mamdani clearly understands the power of presentation. He is not selling socialism as state control. He is selling it as dignity for ordinary people who cannot afford rent, childcare, or groceries. That message explains why he connects with younger voters. Yet it also reveals the political danger facing Democrats. Mamdani hears democratic socialist and thinks economic justice, while millions of swing voters hear the same phrase and start imagining empty shelves, higher taxes, and a government employee running Whole Foods. His biggest challenge is not convincing the View audience that he has good intentions. It is convincing the rest of America that those intentions will not arrive with an enormous bill attached.
Fever. Let's listen to the other big winner in last Tuesday's election, Virginia Governor-elect Abigail Spanberger, who, before the 24 election, said things like, if the party didn't shift to the center, we will get fucking torn apart. And we need to never use the word socialist or socialism ever again. Well, she was right, but they didn't listen. Typical, am I right, ladies? Well, At least the party has a clear choice here, very clear. One wing is saying don't ever use the word socialist again, and one is saying,
I am a democratic socialist.
Clear, huh?
Maher is
So how
not
do we
denying Mamdani's political talent. In fact, he openly admits that winning the mayoral race was an extraordinary achievement. The punchline comes from everything surrounding that compliment. Mamdani may be perfectly suited for New York's progressive electorate, while Spanberger is warning that the same socialist branding could be electoral poison almost everywhere else. That leaves Democrats with a wonderfully awkward family argument. One side is begging the party to hide the word socialism in the basement, turn off the lights and pretend nobody is home. The other side is standing on stage, waving at the cameras and shouting, I am a democratic socialist. Republicans do not even need opposition researchers anymore. The Democrats are producing the attack ads themselves and apparently filming them in high definition. The deeper problem is not simply one political label. It is the widening distance between what excites progressive activists and what reassures ordinary swing voters. Mamdani's message offers transformation, while Spanberger's message offers survival. One promises to reinvent the system. The other is basically asking the party to stop frightening the neighbors. Maher's point is brutally simple. Enthusiasm can win a primary or dominate a progressive city, but national elections are decided by millions of people who hear the word revolution and immediately check whether their retirement account is still there. Maher has made the political divide perfectly clear. Spanberger believes the word socialism could destroy Democrats in competitive elections, while Mamdani proudly embraces it. So before deciding whether that label represents bold economic reform or electoral disaster, it is worth hearing Mamdani explain in his own words what democratic socialism actually means.
So when people say democratic socialist, right, and I'm curious what you think this means. I mean, do you like capitalism?
No, I have many critiques of capitalism. And I think ultimately the definition for me of why I call myself a democratic socialist is the words of Dr. King decades ago. He said, call it democracy or call it democratic socialism. There must be a better distribution of wealth for all of God's children in this country. And that's what I'm focused on is dignity and taking on income inequality. And for too long, politicians have pretended that we're spectators to that crisis of affordability. We're actually actors, and we have the choice to exacerbate it, like Mayor Adams has done, or to respond to it and resolve it, like I'm planning to do.
Okay. So, for people who say that America was built on, and a lot of immigrants, and obviously you speak from an immigrant experience. I mean, you came as a young child, but you speak to a lot of people who came much more recently.
Mamdani's answer is politically effective because he does not describe socialism through ownership structures, economic theory, or government bureaucracy. He describes it through one emotionally powerful word: dignity. Housing, healthcare, and education are presented not as ambitious government programs, but as the basic ingredients of a decent life. It is socialism with the policy manual removed and the inspirational soundtrack turned all the way up. And honestly, that is smart politics. Nobody hears human dignity and immediately reaches for a protest sign. The difficulty begins when the conversation moves from the promise to the price tag. Providing everything necessary for a dignified life sounds compassionate, yet government still has to decide what qualifies as necessary, how much it will cost, and which taxpayers receive the honor of funding the whole experiment. Dignity may be priceless, but New York's budget department will probably insist on a number. This is exactly why Mamdani's message excites progressives and terrifies politicians like Abigail Spanberger. Mamdani turns democratic socialism into a moral argument. Government should serve ordinary people instead of leaving them at the mercy of an unaffordable economy. Maher hears the same argument and sees an election advertisement waiting to happen. One side hears housing, healthcare, and fairness. The other hears higher taxes, expanding government, and a city employee eventually deciding which cereal belongs in the public grocery store. Mamdani is therefore not simply defining an ideology, he is attempting to rescue a politically toxic label by attaching it to needs almost everyone understands. The real test is whether voters will judge democratic socialism by the warmth of its language or by the cost and feasibility of its promises, because selling dignity on television is easy. Delivering it without making the bill look like a ransom note is the part no campaign slogan can explain in 50 seconds.
So how do we decide who's right? Well, it turns out we don't really have to flip a coin. We have the evidence. In 2024, 13 Democrats won in districts Trump also won, all moderates. This isn't rocket science. All the left-leaning think tanks have done autopsies on 2024, and they all came up with the same message: move to the center. Even the New York Times, which did so much to promote woke politics, now says the partisans are wrong. Moving to the center is the way to win. And Democrats should recognize the party moved too far left on social issues after Obama left office. Gosh, if only someone had been saying that all along. But you know, welcome home.
Maher's
Problem
argument
is-
here is brutally practical. Political parties do not get trophies for having the loudest activists, they get power by winning districts. And according to the evidence he presents, the Democrats who survived in Trump territory were not promising a socialist revolution. They were moderates who understood that voters in competitive districts usually want lower prices, safer communities, and a government that does not treat every election like a graduate seminar in political theory. The funniest part is that Democrats apparently paid think tanks to conduct elaborate post-election autopsies, only to discover the political equivalent of stop touching the hot stove, move toward the center, talk like normal people, avoid frightening voters with labels they already distrust. It is the kind of conclusion that requires hundreds of pages, dozens of consultants, and one exhausted voter saying, "Could you people please calm down?" Maher's larger point is not that progressive ideas have no place in the party. It is that ideology becomes useless when it cannot survive outside friendly territory. Mamdani can generate excitement in New York, yet the candidates deciding control of Congress are often running in places where a socialist slogan does not sound revolutionary. It sounds like the beginning of a very expensive government experiment. In politics, applause is flattering, social media enthusiasm is addictive, and election results are the part that actually counts. Mamdani has made democratic socialism sound humane, practical, and almost impossible to oppose. Yet elections are not decided by how warmly an idea is explained on television, they are decided by whether that message can survive outside a friendly audience. And that is precisely where Maher shifts the argument from moral promises to the cold, unforgiving evidence of actual election results. The voters may be sending Democrats a clear message to move toward the center, yet the party's loudest stars appear to be sprinting in the opposite direction. Mamdani is not standing alone. Bernie Sanders and AOC have spent years building the same democratic socialist brand, and Republicans could hardly have designed a more convenient campaign poster. Maher now cuts through the confusion by pointing out the distinction Democrats keep trying to blur. These politicians are not simply liberal Democrats. They are democratic socialists, and they are increasingly competing to become the face of the entire party.
Bernie, AOC, Mamdani are not Democrats. They'll be the first to tell you that. They're democratic socialists, and that's a very different thing, and I don't think people know that yet. I don't think people realize we already have a lot of socialism. Social Security, Medicare, Medicaid, unemployment insurance, food stamps, veterans benefits, Pell Grants, COVID-era payments, farm subsidies, disability payments, Fannie Mae, Freddie Mac, corporate bailouts, and the jobs program that is building weapons the Pentagon doesn't even want. All that is socialism, much of it appropriate to soften the edges of capitalism, but the DSA are radicals about this concept, and radical economic policy is always ineluctably married to radical social policy. Their platform, for example, calls for completely open borders. They're for what Biden was doing, but more. You think you're going to win an election on that? This just seems like more extremism at a time when Americans are begging both parties, please, could just one of you act normal?
Maher's point is simple. Bernie Sanders, AOC, and Mamdani are not just progressive Democrats, they proudly call themselves democratic socialists. Democrats may treat that distinction like tiny legal print, while Republicans will put it in giant red letters and run it in every attack ad until Election Day. The irony is that America already embraces plenty of government-support Social Security, Medicare, farm subsidies, and corporate bailouts. Apparently, socialism is terrifying when ordinary people benefit, but becomes economic stability when banks and corporations need help. Mamdani sells dignity, AOC sells justice, and Bernie sells revolution. Republicans only need to sell one word: socialism. Bill Maher's warning is not really about one mayor, one speech, or even one political label. It is about the direction of the Democratic Party. Mamdani, AOC, and Bernie Sanders are offering voters a bold democratic socialist vision built around dignity, fairness, and economic security. The problem is that outside progressive strongholds, Republicans hear only one word and they are already printing it in giant red letters: socialism. Democrats now face a choice between ideological excitement and electoral survival. They can follow the movement pulling the party further left, or listen to moderates warning that swing voters are asking for stability, affordability, and something that still resembles normal politics. Mamdani may believe he is building the party's future. Maher's brutal punchline is that he may be building the Republican Party's next campaign ad instead.